Welcome to Friday, January 25th, 2024. Your Day Weather Podcast being brought to you by Hot Springs County Travel and Tourism. Reminding you that as the temperatures get colder and the snow returns at Thermopolis, you can always find yourself in hot water. Well, fog and colder weather leading to a lot of nice frost there on Ponderosa Pine near Carpenter, Wyoming yesterday. As winter weather did return to some of you, especially parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, into Kansas, Oklahoma, parts of Texas, getting a little bit of winter weather and some snow finally, returning to the high country of Colorado and Wyoming. Don't be fooled by mid-December is the title of today's podcast, because I can go back historically and find many dry, warm Decembers that were followed by a lot of winter. Don't think December is a proxy for the whole winter season. Sometimes it is, but more often it's not. And we're going to find that out. A series of Canadian cold fronts and storm systems are going to start to be moving across North America through the west. And it begins this weekend with a pretty strong little front that'll be coming through the area late Saturday into Sunday and Monday. This is going to initiate an overall colder pattern, bringing more snow to the high country, off and on. Basically, this is an off and on pattern of mountain snow, a little bit of light snow on the plains, just enough to cause some slick roads and highways and be a bit of a nuisance. And then this pattern, which initially is just going to be colder January-like weather, is going to likely be followed by that severe cold. It's still on the table late next week and beyond. Now, we're still talking about something that's about a week away. So this does offer up the ability for potential things to change. The models could change their mind, and we may see the severe cold outbreak not develop. But right now, it sure looks like it's going to. Therefore, livestock interests and travelers, you really need to be prepared for this change, not only long-term, but short-term as well. And this, as we mentioned yesterday, this is going to be a very disruptive pattern across all of the U.S., all of Canada, the whole North American continent, really going to be looking at a lot of winter weather over the next couple of weeks. The forecasts are going to be fluid. There's details to be sorted out. Be careful when you get on social media in terms of what people post. There could be a lot of different scenarios that unfold here. So we just are going to take this one day at a time. Some beautiful photos coming in over the Christmas and New Year's period. The Jackson Hole area over the Christmas break there. Bison, now Mount Moran, just beautiful shots. Another beautiful shot is that low there in the Gulf of Alaska, spinning its way through the area. Look at the moisture. Look at the strong jet stream energy. Very cold air here on the north slope of Alaska up here. We have warmer, moist air in the southern Pacific getting lifted northward. Arctic air to the north. Just a recipe for a lot to go on. Here's yesterday's storm system that went through the southern Rockies. This is a little bit of a wave right here that's going to come through later today, tonight, and tomorrow morning, producing mountain snow showers across the Rockies. But all of the bigger action that's going to lead to the bigger changes is up there. Here we are with the 500 millibar chart today. That storm that rolled through Arizona and New Mexico yesterday is going to be heading up into the Midwest. Northwest winds aloft. That disturbance right here bringing mountain snow showers to the Intermountain West. We'll keep showing you these highs. The high over Greenland, the high over the Eastern Pacific. Just watch these two areas as we go through the maps, because they just stay in place, really setting up what's going to come later. So this is today. This is by Sunday morning. This initiates a push of colder air coming in. Again, this is another disorganized system, not very well put together. And since its source region is Northwest Canada, not a lot of water associated with it, but it will drag in some much colder temperatures. So this is round two. So this is what's going to come to the western United States and the plains from tomorrow through Monday. So you can see another round of snow in the mountains. Adjacent plains will be getting a little bit of light snow, but all of the west getting more active, but the amounts of precipitation not excessive, but widespread. And as we take a look at the snowfall forecast, this is what falls between Saturday and Monday. This storm, as we mentioned yesterday in the Midwest and the Great Lakes, is going to become a big weather maker and something to watch out for. Then this is what the temperature anomaly looks like by Monday. So just what's going to happen over the next 5 to 6 days here will be a return to winter weather conditions. Then by Tuesday, that low that comes through the Rockies on Sunday becomes better organized. This is going to be a big weather maker, very disruptive for the nation's midsection, with a strong snow event for the upper Midwest, parts of the Corn Belt and the Great Lakes, and possibly the northeastern parts of the United States. And also it will drive some pretty colder air all the way down to the Gulf Coast. But here's the high in the eastern Pacific. Here's the high in Greenland. Here's a consolidation of bitterly cold Arctic air. Look at all the blue and the gray up here developing over Canada. This guy right here is going to initiate a pulling of this Arctic air mass here to the southwest. Between now and next Wednesday, snowfall looks like this. So this is between now and next Wednesday. So you can see a lot of winter weather across the United States. This is the temperature anomaly by next Thursday. So the colder air sticks around the plains and the Rockies, with the purple there, the deep, deep, deep cold, still up in Canada. So if that deep cold up there in Canada gets the opportunity to head south, that's where things really begin to change. So what I'm going to do is do the exact same thing I did yesterday, step you through the 3 main model suites to show you what scenarios may unfold. The European model shows the strong ridging all the way up into the Gulf of Alaska, strong ridging near Greenland. This bottles up the Arctic air, almost completely pinches it off. That may eventually happen. And if that happens, there's nowhere for this Arctic air to go. If you think about it, it's not going to have the ability to go back over the North Pole. And the thing to remember about the Arctic air masses that we see, Arctic air is dense. The properties of cold air, because the molecules are closer together and vibrating less, makes the air very dense, like molasses. It's hard to move. When you get a large Arctic air mass of this caliber, of this scale, it just doesn't move quickly just because of mass. So when it gets like this and it doesn't have anywhere to go, but once it starts to go somewhere, it does get momentum. And this is what could lead to this large Arctic outbreak. And while it may be an Arctic outbreak that could go several days. Okay, so this is by next Friday on the European model. And this is the, let me go back, sorry about that. This is the cold anomaly by next Friday. So you can see the leading edge of the Arctic air starts to push into Texas here. The purple is coming down east of the divide, but very cold air is also found west of the divide. Now, the Canadian model has really departed from this. The Canadian model wants to push the Arctic air westward off British Columbia back out into the eastern Pacific. This, in all likelihood, is an error. So I don't think the Canadian model probably is representing this Arctic air mass correctly. And this happens. This Arctic air mass is so big, the models are going to have problems with it. So these models I'm showing you are for display purposes only. But the Canadian, even if it does that, even if the Canadian ends up right, the cold air still spills in. The GFS model looks very similar to the European model, where it has the high pressure ridge in the eastern Pacific, high pressure building up into the Greenland area, and beginning to kind of pinch this off. And this is what the temperature anomaly by next Friday looks like. So all 3 models, regardless, will let a lot of Arctic air into the western United States by late next week. All 3 do. It's just going to be the intensity and the caliber and the staying power. Now, this is by next Sunday. The European basically brings this would be a vortex, polar vortex, right over the Rockies and the plains by next Sunday. Strong high pressure ridge in the Pacific, strong high pressure ridge in Greenland. This Arctic air mass basically breaks into 2 pieces. An intense piece across the lower 48 here in the west, another intense piece of Arctic air that's left up in the higher latitudes. And then this Arctic air mass, as we said, isn't going to move really quickly. It's got nothing really to push it along. Not only will this bring Arctic air into the equation, but snow colliding with the warmer air to the south is going to produce some snowfall with it as well. This is a situation where El Nino is not going to help us. this is where the Arctic just completely takes over the pattern. Look at the temperature anomaly on the European by next Sunday. That is extremely impressive. And notice how it's cut off. It's just a big area, big blob of extremely cold Arctic conditions. It gets all the way to the coastal areas. That doesn't happen very often. Again, this is something more than a week away. So don't take this for gospel truth. But this is a scenario that we have to look at. And this is a scenario that would be severe with the cold and the snow for a lot of the West if this does happen. This is why just stay tuned, stay abreast of the situation. So if we loop this together, European model, over the next 10 days, you can see the evolvement of the colder air in the West and the consolidation of the Arctic air as it really gets to become widespread across the Intermountain West, all the way to the California and the Washington, Oregon coast areas. Now, this is only through next Sunday. This Arctic air could very well stick around for several days afterwards. So when we take a look and see what happens, the Canadian model, if it does do this, takes that Arctic air, keeps it east of the divide. But we're not going to probably buy the Canadian model, but it is a solution. That could end up happening, so that's why we're showing it to you. The GFS model is very similar by next Sunday. It doesn't want to pinch off the Arctic air so much, it kind of stretches the vortex out and kind of keeps it more consolidated. But when you see it stretching north-south like this, it probably is going to break into two, like what the European here is showing there. And if you look at the GFS model by next Sunday, widespread Arctic air across the region. This is the 10-day snowfall forecast for Canada and the U.S. Very, very impressive. A lot of pink on that map where snow cover could get laid down. And thing to remember about Arctic air masses and snow cover, if you put some snow on the ground, then you put Arctic air on top of it, that makes the temperatures that you're going to experience, especially at night, even colder. Another thing that we haven't mentioned but have neglected to do so, one element taking part in this is a stratospheric warming event. We talk about this sometimes during the winter season, but this is high in the stratosphere, and those red colors there and those white colors you see show where the stratospheric areas high in the atmosphere that warm and expand, those high elevation warmer temperatures, very high in the atmosphere, cause an accordion effect that squeezes the atmosphere basically near the ground because the atmosphere has to expand as it warms, and it pushes the cold air off the higher latitudes to the lower latitudes. So what we're seeing here is a connection between the polar vortex that settles into the west and where it's warmest in the stratosphere. And that's when you usually have your worst Arctic outbreaks. So there is support on many levels for this Arctic outbreak to come together. But again, these Arctic outbreaks can split into different vortices. There's a lot that could go on, but we just want to give you a heads up that we've got to keep an eye on things as we go into the longer term. But even into the short and medium range terms, it is going to be winter again. Have yourself a good weekend. We'll have a lot more to know and discuss on Monday.